Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with the webinar. I'd like to welcome everybody today. This is a Mastodon career call, and the focus is on networking today. My name is Ashley McCardle. I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services here at IPFW, and I'm also an alumni. And I'll have Denise introduce herself.
Hello everyone, I'm Denise Bates, and I work at the Fort Wayne Children's Choir as the Executive Director, and I'm also an alumni here at IPFW. Happy to be here with you all.
So please feel free to type any questions that you have in the chat box, and Denise and I will answer those as they come up. If you haven't done so, take a second or two to fill out our poll questions, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about what the right answer is for that, what percentage of jobs are not posted and are found through networking. So at this point, we'll go ahead and get started. And feel free to, again, ask any questions that you might have throughout this presentation. Okay, and I think it's important to point out, I asked Denise to do this webinar because she's good at networking, but the funny thing about Denise is, and you can speak for yourself, is she doesn't like to network.
I don't. Anytime there's an event or something titled a networking event per se, it gives me the cringe. I hate it. I think that I like to call it something different, but the word networking has always had a negative connotation for me. So this is a great session to really talk about how do you get connected in the community if you're someone like me who does not like the formal networking event.
Not that I love networking. I probably wouldn't use the word hate nor love. I just understand that it's very important, and so I try to find a balance and make it work. So things we're going to talk about today is actually defining networking, what that means. We'll talk a little bit about a trilogy of trust and how relationships are formed. Hopefully you know who Kevin Bacon is. If you don't, you'll make me feel super old. But we'll talk a little bit about Kevin Bacon game. Obviously utilizing the social media and how we can use that for networking. Going to different events. There's actually some different strategies to really make those events more successful, especially if you're a little bit more shy or introverted. There's some different techniques that we'll talk about. Obviously what to wear, professional dress, professional image, we'll mention. And I would always like to talk about informational interviews. I think that is kind of a form of networking in itself. And then we'll talk about some other upcoming events. Okay, so I asked at the beginning, what % of jobs are posted and found through networking? And I know a lot of you put B, 30. Anyone want to type in an answer in the chat box of what they really think it is that didn't get to answer that question? D. D is correct, Heidi. 80%. 80% of jobs are not posted and found through networking. And I think when I tell people that answer or I read that statistic, it's shocking to a lot of people. And so I want you to think about that statistic as we're going along these different slides on why networking is so important. And just come back to this stat, because 80% is a lot of jobs. And so if you really think about it, and many of you might have this example, think back to a job that you got. Did you get it because you knew somebody, or because you knew somebody who knew somebody? And so a lot of times that's what happens. You have a boss that comes to you and tells you a colleague quit, and they ask you, do you know of anybody? And that's essentially what networking is all about. So 80%, correct. Okay, so it's not what you know, but who knows you, or but who you know and who knows you. And I would have to say, for a long time, I really just didn't think that was fair. As a college student, I thought I should get hired based on my degree and my skills and my abilities, and not because I knew somebody that worked in that company. I just didn't think it was fair, but that's the reality of the world that we live in. So networking is all about making professional connections. And basically what I like to think, it's like a database of your contacts. So kind of like a little Rolodex of people you know. And you just kind of keep adding to that little Rolodex kind of thing.
What's important to know about networking, it does seem unfair that you might get hired because you know somebody. The thing about networking that makes it work is that you have connections, but they're real connections, and you have to have skills to back it up. You can't just have a buddy somewhere. You have to really have skills to back it up, and so that's where the unfairness quotient hopefully goes away. And think about it as connections, not so much somebody scratching my back. It's more what can your skills do to help somebody else's organization.
Yeah, that's a good point. Your connections in your network might get you an interview,
right?
Might get you a meeting, but at the end of the day, it will be your skills and your abilities and your degree that will get you the job.
Exactly.
Okay, good point. So how do you build your own network? Without sounding ridiculous, it's everywhere, to be honest with you. It can happen on a golf course. It can happen when you're out there volunteering. It can happen at a grocery store. And just being purposeful of meeting people and genuinely expressing interest in what they do and where they work. So that could happen when you're volunteering. That could happen when you're doing internships and you meet other people from different departments. Externships, they're kind of like job shadows. Obviously at your job. We'll talk a little bit about informational interviews. Professional associations, I know Denise belongs to quite a few. And I do as well, and great resource for connections and meeting people in the field that you want to get into. So find out what professional associations match your career field, join them, and if you're a current student right now, sometimes those associations are a lot cheaper to join as a student, and there's more benefit to that too. Extracurricular activities, so all those student organizations, professional networking sites, we'll talk about those. And guess what? It's December 15th, and many of you probably have some holiday parties on the calendar. And obviously, you're going there to enjoy the holiday spirit, but, talking, standing next to somebody and enjoying the eggnog could lead to a potential contact. We'll give you actual specific networking events that we recommend, listservs. Denise and I are both alumni, and you're actually a little bit more involved in alumni relations than I am.
It's really fun. I enjoy working with the Alumni Association. I serve on the board of directors, and what's been great about that is that I get to meet lots of great folks, and then we can build meaningful connections, and then we can move further on how we're going to make things happen. So the Alumni Association is a great place to network, for sure.
And I think, we're getting ready to start what we're calling a Mastodon Mentor Program, where we will match students and alumni up to talk more about their profession, and we're just going to kick that off in the next year. But alumni like to give back in different ways rather than just money and gifts like that. They want to share their knowledge about their careers. So be on the lookout for some information about this Mastodon Mentor Program. Obviously, career fairs, we'll have one April 11th over in the new International Ballroom, and we're looking to hopefully have around 100 employers there. So even if you're not particularly interested in a particular company that's there, that might be a contact for you, and they might give you a card or at least a name of somebody else. And then I was told as a young girl that I needed to learn how to play golf because my dad made a lot of business deals on the golf course. Now, I'm definitely not a good golfer, but the point is it just doesn't have to happen in a board meeting. Deals and networks can be expanded many places.
I have to say that the first place I started to build my network was volunteering and being a member of our community, and that's so important to think about as you want to build your networks, is how can you give back to the community, because those are other like-minded folks. They get to see your work ethic, they get to see how you interact with people, and it's a real connection. and then they've seen your skill and are more likely to refer you if there's an opening at their workplace or to serve as a reference. So those are those meaningful parts of your network that you can build together, and I have found the most success doing that through volunteerism.
So let's talk a little bit about this trilogy of trust. Bill Gates kind of formed this concept, and basically what it is the trust that one person has in another, then it's passed on to the third party. So if Denise is hiring somebody, an intern, and let's say that potential candidate is Bob, and Bob puts me down for a reference, Denise can check the reference by calling me, and just the fact that I serve as a reference for Bob might mean something to Denise if Denise and I already have an established relationship. So it's this trust-building kind of connection where, basically people do business with and hire people they know and trust.
Exactly. It's so important when you network and let folks see your character to be honest and to help build that trust, because what you're asking someone to do is to go out on the line for you at some point. So you have to be willing to be invested in that relationship. And on the flip side, if you're going to ask for a reference or something like that, just on a side note, make sure that it's someone who knows your skill and character when you do that, because I can't tell you how many folks I've hired and I call their references and they're like, yeah, I kind of know them or something like that, and it's so disheartening as an employer. Like, ooh, I thought I had a great candidate here and they weren't bright enough to put the right references down for me to get someone who really knew them well. But always be careful when you have you're holding someone else's trust. So be sure that you guard that carefully.
Okay. This networking activity I typically do with a ball of yarn. That'd be pretty hard to do in this webinar setting. So what I would like for you to do is to maybe type in your answers in the little chat box on the left. And how this works is, we have quite a few people attending this webinar, and so I want you to think about just our own little group, these webinar attendees, and the people that we know and our connections. And so if I am interested in getting into a certain career, I'm guaranteeing to bet some of you might know somebody who is in that particular career. So to illustrate this point, I'm going to ask if any of the attendees know maybe an entrepreneur that I can talk to about maybe owning my own business. So if you know an entrepreneur, go ahead and type in the little chat window who you know, or if you know somebody and what that entrepreneur does or something. Does anyone know an entrepreneur? Oh, Emily Burmis does corporate consulting. Okay. So right there, I got a name of somebody. And if I knew Thomas, let's say we were in a class together or, colleagues, I could ask Thomas for maybe a phone number. And then I could also ask Thomas, hey, do you mind if I contact Emily and say that you gave me her name? And so Emily right away might recognize your name and be willing to kind of help me learn more about what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Does that make sense? Okay, and so Heidi, great example. Yeah. Maybe I had no idea that the Women's Bureau has a professional group just for women business owners. And so right there you gave me a lead of an event or a group that I could go and connect with other women who have started their own businesses. So sometimes it's surprising, maybe your own circle of friends or your own family or your classmates or colleagues has this expanded network that you're not even tapping into. And so that's kind of the point of the activity. Okay, please tell me you know who Kevin Bacon is.
I know.
So a lot of people know that you can play this game, the Kevin Bacon game, with movies. and that he's been in a ridiculous amount of movies, and Denise could say a name of an actor, and the game is I try to figure out, within two actors, they're connected within the movies.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's kind of that same concept with networking. And so to illustrate that, I kind of use that as an example, but more so a specific movie that he was in called Pay It Forward. And if you haven't seen this movie, I would highly recommend it. It's super great. But the thing about networking is it's not take, use your connections. It's definitely about paying it forward, using your connections, but in a genuine kind of organic way. And I know Denise will talk about this in a little bit. But just, realizing that it's kind of good karma to help people as well. People are going to come to you for connections, and then someday you might be going to them. And so that's kind of the illustration on that point. Okay, so you might know these things, but we just need to hammer them home a little bit more of why networking is important. Especially if you're trying to break into a new community or a new career field, it's going to definitely make you known. It allows you to meet people in your industry or in your career field, so that when they get your resume, maybe they'll recognize your name or names of references. Because if you're staying in good old Fort Wayne, in my opinion, Fort Wayne's a small town.
It sure is.
Denise and I already found mutual friends that we have known, but we didn't know each other. So just networking kind of gets your name out there. It also makes your work known. If you're working on a specific project, or you're a consultant, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're in sales, making those networking contacts is going to be pretty helpful. I mentioned earlier that I'm in a bunch of different professional associations. I get new ideas all the time when I go to conferences for career services and higher education. New ideas, new resources, and we just kind of share ideas because of the contacts and the relationships that I've built. Sometimes, they'll give you a different perspective on new ideas. You're, making yourself think outside of the box because somebody challenged your perspective in your new network. New collaborations always develop as a result of meeting new people. Someday you might need letters of recommendation. Obviously, it could lead to getting interviews or job leads. But I don't want you to think that that is the most important thing about networking. Networking is important to get jobs. Remember that 80%. But networking is important to do regardless of if you're interviewing or not interviewing. And we'll kind of touch on that in a little bit too. It can lead invitations to give talks. That's why Denise is sitting in my chair. Somebody recommended me to contact her because of her networking and her involvement in different organizations and being an alumni. You'll get asked to get on committees, and it's obviously an opportunity to gain a mentor. It kind of has like this snowball effect of different things.
So we hear this word or this phrase social networking so often, and it's important. It's a way that we can stay connected with folks, and it's very real. But there's sometimes we need to be very careful about how we perceive or let ourselves be perceived on these social networking sites. As you can see from the slide, there's many, many of them up there. There's two that I want to just touch on quickly, Facebook and LinkedIn. Facebook, almost everybody in the world has a Facebook account. If you are one of the 1% of the world that doesn't have one, you probably will have one soon. But Facebook, it seems to have taken over our culture, and it almost makes it so things aren't real unless we see it on Facebook. I just caution you to be careful about how you're networking on Facebook. And there's all kinds of seminars on what you can take about setting your privacy settings and how you're going to connect, but be intentional about how you use Facebook. And I mean that if you're going to go out and friend lots of folks, that sounds great, but then be intentional about what you're going to say on your wall and on other people's walls. Because I'll tell you something, once it's out there, it's permanent. You can take down maybe a post, but someone has already seen it. It's already been in somebody's newsfeed, and you can't get it out of that. So be intentional about the pictures you're going to post, about the posts you're going to put on your wall and other people's walls, because that networking can have a great effect or an adverse effect on you. I can tell you story upon story upon story about how social networking is being used currently for job searches and for current employers to monitor their employees. And so your physical presence, we'll talk about that a little later in the presentation, is just as important as your web presence. And Facebook seems to be dictating a lot of how we do that. Just by typing in the chat box, is there anybody out there who uses Facebook? Could you give us a yes or a no, or I'm a super user, or anything like that? There's a person who says no. Oh my goodness, I didn't know there was anybody who didn't use Facebook. I'm just teasing. Of course there's folks that don't use Facebook, but it seems to have taken over our culture. A couple of no's. The other social networking site that has become more professional in nature is called LinkedIn. And it is truly a networking site where we're trying to build relationships professionally. I encourage you to build a LinkedIn profile and to start to look at folks that you want to friend and you can be connected to. I have to say that I have a great story. On LinkedIn, there was another alumni from IPFW who's a financial planner who found me on LinkedIn. We had mutual connections. He messaged me on LinkedIn, said, I see that we have a lot of mutual friends. I would love for us to sit down and talk and just to get to know each other better. And it was totally great. We met at Panera one afternoon. It was very sunny. It was great. What we found out was that his wife was interested in the organization that I run. Met her. She joined our board of directors. He's not my financial planner. He doesn't manage any of my assets, but we've become connected, and it was a way that benefited me when he sought out the connection. So LinkedIn is a great way to learn more about those that you're connected to. Facebook, LinkedIn, both great sites, but the point I want to make sure you take home is that be intentional about what you post because it is permanent, and folks are looking at it.
I'll mention real quick that LinkedIn, we are actually having another webinar next month, January 19th, all about LinkedIn, graduating to LinkedIn, and how you can kind of use LinkedIn in your job search or for networking. And so the presenter, Anthony Giuliano from Asher Agency, will be here presenting. So mark that on your calendar if you're interested in LinkedIn. It's definitely a vital tool that I think will become more and more important in the world of networking. But some do's and don'ts. Denise touched on some of these. Google yourself. I want you to type your name in Google, hit enter, and see what pops up. I want you to take a look at the picture that you have on your Facebook page. And if you're job searching, maybe the picture of you and your significant other or you and family members or kids isn't necessarily the most professional image that you want on there. You want to think about putting a professional image on there. Denise mentioned locking your profile. You don't want to post anything. Have that locked profile and then, test it out. Can you get into it? Can people see what groups you're affiliated with, etc.? One statistic that we share quite a bit is from XUNet, and they said that 77% of executive recruiters admitted to using search engines to further investigate job candidates. 35% said they eliminated candidates due to information uncovered online. And so that is why this whole net rep and the social networking do's and don'ts are important. And there's some people out there that have 500 plus Facebook friends or 600 LinkedIn connections. And are those really genuine or not? Who knows?
Right.
I'm a little bit more purposeful of who I connect with on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is great because it allows you to see, I believe they're called like the different levels.
Yep.
So first connections, second connections, and maybe that's kind of where you draw your line on who you're connecting with. But it's a really great tool, but there's definitely some do's and don'ts. And I encourage you to join our webinar next month to learn more specifics on that.
Before we move away from social networking, I know some of you don't use Facebook, and that's fine. I think at some point it might be an evil that all of us at least have to acknowledge, whether you have a presence on or no. But be aware even after you have the job, what you're saying on Facebook, because every action you have reflects credit or discredit upon yourself. So ranting on Facebook might not be the best forum to do that, or trying to solve this injustice that's happened to you might not be the best thing, because that network is watching what you're doing and they're seeing your posts. So be aware of that, and Ashley and I have both said this 100 times and we'll probably say it 100 more, is just be intentional and purposeful about how you're utilizing these social networking tools.
We do have a really great video on social networking on our website. I don't have time to show that today, but I would encourage you to go to that website and watch the Perils of Social Networking. It's a career spot video provided by IPFW Career Services. Okay, so networking at events. What are some things you need to do before you go? For those who hate networking, this is important stuff. You really need to do your research. Find out who will be there and who you kind of want to meet with. In terms of conferences or workshops, sometimes the people organizing those things will send out an attendee list. So you can look through and get out your highlighter and circle some things and realize, okay, there's going to be 60 people at this event, and these are the people that I really want to meet with for whatever reason. And so then you're prepared to go, and you won't be so overwhelmed when you attend the event. And then be conscious or thinking about, what do you want to talk to them about? What are some of your goals? How are you going to integrate your work and your interest into the conversation? And we have some different tips on how to start conversations. And then, if you have this list of people you want to meet, and that's pretty much kind of your game plan, ask the people in charge of the event to point people out, or connect or connect with the host or people kind of working the event to kind of help you go. But the more you are prepared for attending different networking events, the better you'll do with them. Now, it's kind of hard if you attend some chamber events or speed networking events. You're not necessarily going to have a list, but you should have done your research to know, kind of what the structure will be like, so you don't walk in kind of blindsided.
So the point to drive home for all of us is that networking is really about building relationships. And that's so important to me. If I hear someone say, "Oh, would you like to come to the chambers, meet me at 5?" I never go. I find it hard, because anything that's called a networking event, I use that in quotes, to me seems artificial. But that's me, and that's why I'm helping with this session called People Who Hate Networking, because I don't like it. But what I do like is building relationships. And I believe that the best networking, or I call it connecting, is organic, and it comes from real relationships. So there's a process about being intentional about relationship building, and to be real. That there's a requirement on both sides of that relationship, that on my part I have to be somewhat transparent and let folks see who I really am. I also have to be willing to have value in the proposition. So if I'm talking with someone else, I'm listening, I'm taking in what they can do, but not just thinking about, so I'm listening to them about what they can do for me. It's what can I do for them, how can I connect them to someone else? So it's for a mutual benefit. And I feel like those connections are the best ones and they help you move forward. I can't tell you how many relationships I have that I can now, because they were organic, we built on a real connection, and it was about me connecting to them, to connecting to someone else, to connect to someone else. And have they helped me get jobs? Absolutely. Have they helped me? I'm a fundraiser, so have they helped me get in the door to talk with the right people about fundraising? Absolutely. Have they helped with other kinds of things? Absolutely. But it's always because I believe the best kind of networking is this organic, real relationship kind of thing. So I don't want it to be forced. Now, that being said, there are times when I have to go to events and I don't shudder and I go, and we'll talk about it in the next slide, how I work through that and how other folks who are a little more like me, that I'm an extrovert, but I really don't like forced networking, so how do I work through that?
One thing I want to add to it, it was interesting, we had a conversation at a panel I did for MBA students a couple weeks ago, and we had different representatives of different generations there, and one of my panelists mentioned that he doesn't utilize social media, and so if you ask him to do LinkedIn, or if you send him a happy birthday on a Facebook, to him it seems very fake and 2 seconds to type and hit enter. He said he's old school. He wants you to call him. He wants to receive a card in the mail. Yeah. He wants to still go out to coffee. And so think about that too when you're trying to build different relationships in terms of who it is and maybe preferences, and trying to tailor that a little bit more to really make it more real, because everybody values different things.
So, for those of you in the group who may or may not be shy, but you really hate networking, how do you get around that? Because it is an evil that we in the business world, whether you're a nonprofit, corporate America, schools, wherever you might be, you're going to have to network. So how do we do that? The first thing might be is to volunteer on the committee that's planning the event. It's a way for you to have a job when you get there, so it doesn't feel like you're standing there by yourself with a room full of people you don't know and you have to go and start to talk to people and you're uncomfortable. So volunteering is always a great way to start. Another way is to bring a friend. I encourage you to do that always, because when you bring 1 or 2 other folks, you have all of their circles of influences with you. And so if they know somebody there, then there's an instant connection and you can start to talk and to build those connections very easily. Speed networking events have a lot more structure. It isn't just an open room of you staring into faces you don't know. It's more structured where you go around the room and you have 30, 45 seconds, a minute to talk with someone about your elevator speech back and forth. Social media, we talked about that. Starting with small groups, I have found that one-on-one meetings work best for me. So if I meet somebody at an event, I might trade business cards with them and say, hey, could we connect in the next couple of weeks and talk more one-on-one? Because I feel like those organic relationships can be built there. And I have found them to be fabulous. They've worked 100% of the time. And then coming up with what is your opening line? How are you going to introduce yourself? So have you ever been to an event like this, or what do you do, or who are you, or whatever? So you have an opening line. What I have found that has helped when I'm thinking of tips and techniques of going into a networking event is that I mentally prepare myself, because I already know I don't care for this, that I'm going to meet X number of people. And so I give myself a goal, so I feel like I might be off the hook after I've done that. So it's not forced, but I tell myself you don't have to meet everybody in the room, so it doesn't feel so daunting. So I give myself a goal of I want to make 5 connections while I'm here. And how can I do that? Other techniques would be to arrive early. So it helps you figure out where your space is going to be. And like I said, don't try to talk to everybody there. Set a goal. And then consider yourself successful. If you've made 5 connections and those are real connections, that is a huge success. Just because you shook hands with everybody in the room, that doesn't mean that you've made a true connection with everybody in the room, or you've traded business cards. I'm telling you, Ashley and I, if we put all of the business cards that we've collected together, we could build a 5-story house of cards. I mean, they are powerful when you've made a real connection. but if I haven't made a connection, they are somewhat worthless. So don't feel like that's all you have to do is collect cards. What you're trying to do is to make a connection with someone.
Okay, so when you go to these events, and we said, have something prepared, an opening line, what I would like for you to do is to remember Jim's crazy house. And I'll give credit to my boss, Jim McAfee, for this kind of imagery. He explained that it's all about what does the business card represent. Okay, so if you're walking in, think about this business card. Either you want to get, and again, make it a real connection, but what kinds of things should you talk about? Do you talk about, where people live? Where are you from? Did you grow up in Fort Wayne? Do you talk about the different parts of town that they're in? So basically, kind of a personal map of where they're coming from. You talk about extracurricular activities. Talk about the tin caps or sports. It's always kind of a safe topic. You can talk about travel. Do you have any holiday vacation plans? So in your mind, you should have this vision of a house with things going on airplanes buzzing around, and then of course you've got the whole kids route, which sometimes can be kind of tricky. I don't necessarily ever ask about people's children. I think it goes a little too personal, but other people have different opinions about that. People love to talk about their dogs and cats,
Right.
especially in people in my office. And so it might be that instant connection. There's all kinds of things that you could talk about to make that connection. And I think it's really funny if you're from Fort Wayne, born and raised, and lived here most of your life, or lived here for a while and recently moved back. One of the first questions that I get asked is, "Where'd you go to school?"
Yeah.
And it's not college, it's high school.
Yes.
And so then you play the name game. When did you graduate? And that's fine. You just want to make the connections. So you want to think about either Jim's crazy house, and so hopefully that imagery, that crazy, beautiful picture that I created, can help you think of of topics to come up. Now, I personally think you should avoid politics and religion at networking events.
Absolutely.
Hot topics, people feel very passionate about it, and you just want to kind of stay on safe topics for the first meeting at these kinds of things.
Right. So if time is short, exchange business cards and ask if you can give them a call later. If you do ask them that, then do what you said you're going to do. If you say you're going to shoot them an email, do that. That is one of the things in building real connections that we want to do, is to honor what we say we're going to do. And that builds trust right away. Finding common references is another thing. So finding out that you have a mutual friend, or finding out that everybody likes Indiana University, or wherever your hot place is that you like Colts football, that's a great way to get an instant spark, and then the conversation moves more freely. Also, what wasn't on Jim's house, which is always something you can talk about, is if they have where do you work, or what do you do, or tell me about where you were before this job, or anything like that. You don't want to get too deep in why aren't you there anymore. Those kinds of situations are more sticky, but you can always talk about where they work too, because you might be interested in that, or share about what you do, and really understand your organization too. So if someone says, "Where do you work?" I tell them I want to be passionate about telling them that too. So understand your own elevator speech, who you are, those kinds of things. So other techniques and tips.
Okay, so some of the stuff might be helpful when you're in the middle of a conversation. We'll talk about active listening in a couple more slides, but sometimes when you rephrase what they're saying, that way the communication is clear, but you're connecting and engaged in what is going on instead of this kind of blank stare and you're just thinking, how can I get out of here? I'm sick of this event. So rephrase what they're saying. Say to them, that's a really good question. That's a really good story. So just kind of some follow-up cues. Go full circle. That is a good technique to maybe leave the conversation. So if you started the conversation maybe talking about, the opening presentation at a conference and how great it was, you could then go full circle and say, well, it's been a great conference so far. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. It was really nice to meet you. I'll see you later this afternoon.
Right.
And so you kind of just wrap up the conversation and excuse yourself. Maintaining eye contact comfortably. Just while you're talking to them, engage. Mirroring them, if they're being very formal, maybe you can be a little bit more formal. If they're a little bit more easygoing, laid back, maybe cracking a joke or two, you can kind of meet them at whatever level they're at. Again, to start some of those Jim's Crazy House topics is, I read the other day that travel's been up, this holiday season. Do you have any travel plans? Anything that's kind of in the headlines is sometimes good. But again, staying away from those controversial topics. We recommend an elevator speech, which we'll talk about in a second. And then believe it or not, this might sound ridiculous, but practice your handshake. Nobody wants to shake hands with kind of the fishy, kind of not very strong handshake. You want to make a good first impression, so practice that. And then, this is hard even for us extroverts on how do you lead conversations. What I do, and right or wrong, is sometimes if it's at an event where I'm pretty well connected and I know a lot of people, I will do an introduction and then excuse myself.
Yeah.
So I'll bring people into the conversation and then, kind of be in the conversation for a little bit and then excuse myself to go do something else. You can excuse yourself to go to the restroom, to make a phone call, but it is kind of hard to leave a conversation and not feel like the meeting is over abruptly.
Right. In terms of handshake, there's a lot of mixed bag out there, and what is really preferred is there's differences for men and women, I have found.
That's right.
And women feel like they don't want to, for whatever reason, they don't want to have a firm handshake, and so they gently offer their hand. And if that's your preference, that's fine, but I think the way that our business community has gone is that men and women shake hands the same way. So feel like you can give a firm handshake. On the flip side, the men in the group know that you're stronger than women, and don't be brutal when you squeeze a woman's hand. I think that might be a tactic that men use sometimes. Is my handshake's stronger than yours, and they go back and forth. I'm teasing. I don't know. I'm not a man, but I know that that's part of that. So understand what your handshake is going to be and practice it. In terms of your elevator speech, I encourage you to practice this too. The only way we get better is to practice. If any musicians in the crowd, the only way I got better at playing saxophone was to practice my scales. And that was an essential I needed to know. Same thing with my elevator speech. I need to know and feel confident about who I am and what I do. So I don't just want to introduce myself that, hi, I'm Denise and this is my job title, and just let it rest. But really, what is it that I feel like I do? And so I provide an opportunity for kids to experience vocal music, and maybe what am I passionate about in terms of volunteering? What am I passionate about? So to know that speech, but to practice it. So when you're in the car by yourself, saying it so it doesn't feel rehearsed when you talk about it, but it doesn't feel foreign in your mouth either. So to know this, so this takes a little bit of thought about what is my story? And you might, some of these things we've said, you probably don't want to talk about this, that, or the other. Make sure that you're putting the things that you want to be intentional telling other folks into your elevator speech. That being said, your elevator speech should not be 38 minutes long. You should have a 30-second one, and I encourage us to have a 90-second one. So the short and the long. I work with a nonprofit, and so we teach our board of directors being ambassadors, our organization's elevator speech the same way. We have a short one, so if you're just going up one floor, and we have a long one, a 90-second one, so if you're going up many floors. But it's good to have your own personal brand and your own personal elevator speech as well. So now we've talked about our net image, we've talked about handshake and how we're going to talk to folks. The other thing is professional image, and there's a big difference between professional dress and casual dress. And we want to be intentional about how we come off. And depending on the event, that should dictate your clothing. And I agree 100% that I always dress one click up than what the situation might dictate. So if it's a business casual kind of event, I probably will dress business. Because I want my image, I'm intentional about my image, that I want to be viewed as someone who is trustworthy, professional, can be depended on in the rough situations. And like it or not, our society has come to the fact that we judge books by their covers. And so we have to be prepared to let our professional image talk for ourselves. So I encourage you to figure out what image it is you want to share. Whatever that is, feel comfortable with what it is, and then be intentional about how you do it. In terms of interviewing, and we're not going to exactly go down this road all the way, but there's a certain dress about how you interview as well. And if you think of some networking as interviewing, you want to dress that way as well. If I can casually share a quick story, when my former employer, I interviewed an intern who came to her interview in a tank top, a short skirt, and heels. And it was inappropriate in all categories. And I shared feedback with her to that end that what image are you telling me? Because right now it seems to me your image is that you're irresponsible. And she was a wonderfully smart young woman who had a great career in front of her, but she needed to know that image is so important as we move forward. So why does networking work? Because we know it does. 80% of jobs we saw at the front end are acquired through networking. Because at the end of the day, people like to help people, especially when there's a common connection. So if I know someone who knows somebody else. People know that their futures are uncertain, and so they might want to have you help them at some point down the road. And people also want to be considered as experts and be connected to experts. I have two very real situations that proved beneficial in terms of networking. The first one is I met a young woman who had just come to Fort Wayne, graduated from Purdue at West Lafayette, got her first job, and then she didn't know what to do. She was from another town in Indiana and was new to Fort Wayne, and she found me through another connection. We met, and it was a very nice meeting, and I said, well, so do you know this person, or do you know that person? And she said, no, I would love to. So what I organized was a lunch, and there were 6 of us around the table. We went to a very casual restaurant. We sat for an hour, and all 6 of us just talked with her about what we do. And everybody's got to eat a meal. No, everybody just gave an hour of their time, and this young woman felt so much more connected. And what it did was it exposed her to 6 circles of influence, and it connected her in the community in a way that may have taken her many months to do. So, as a connector, we want to help pay it forward. Someone did that for me, so I wanted to do that for her, and it's proved very beneficial. Another story to share is there was another woman who moved to Fort Wayne about 4 years ago, didn't know a soul, and she was purposeful about getting connected in the community, got a job at a credit union in HR, and she just went down the list. She was intentional about who she wanted to meet, and her first week, she made appointments with a couple nonprofits to get involved. She moved into an apartment downtown and made her first stop at Club Soda and started talking to the server there, and she said, okay, who do I need to know in this community? And it paid off. She's the vice president at the Chamber of Commerce now, and her job that she got was 100% completely because of her networking, because she paid her dues, she met the right people, she showed her strong work ethic, she showed that she was a connector, and networking works. And she's a proven success story about how her career has benefited from getting to know people, but also serving the community through those connections.
And that just popped a thought in my mind. I don't know if it's Leadership Fort Wayne or the Chamber or both, but our community came out with 101 connectors, and it's a list of people who actually are quote-unquote master networkers in their field. And I don't know if they've made that list public.
It is public. It's on the journalgazette.net, and it's on Leadership Fort Wayne's list. They brought us together to start to talk about trends of how do networkers work together, and what skills do they share so we can teach those skills to others.
So
it's a great list.
That's a good segue into doing informational interviews. And that list might be potential people to do these interviews with. So informational interviews could be what happens as a result of networking. So you go to a chamber event or you go to a conference, you get a business card, then what do you do with it? Does it sit in your Rolodex, or are you going to follow up? And so you might follow up with a phone call, you might follow up with an email, but maybe or coffee. But if you're kind of trying to do this for a job search or some career exploration, this might be a time to meet with that person at their place of work, bring a list of questions, and basically ask for suggestions, either on how to expand your network or how to break into that field. It's just kind of advice, information sharing. You are not asking for a job. It's not appropriate to ask for a job. It's just kind of information sharing. And maybe using that 101 list of connectors, or utilizing our alumni. And I mentioned earlier that we are going to be doing this Mastodon Mentor program. So soon we'll have a program in place for you to actually have names and contacts. But this could lead to a job, and this is a way to build that network and to develop those relationships past that piece of paper, which is the business card. There are some different events here in Fort Wayne. I haven't been to all of them. The Fort Wayne Chamber of Commerce, they do Meet Me at 5 events once a month at different businesses. 5 o'clock, it costs like $10 for entry. And there is no set structure. You go, you have your business cards, and again, our recommendation is you have your own goal in mind and use some of the techniques and tips that we talked about to make that event successful. They used to do morning mixes. I'm not sure if they still do those or not,
Right.
But they used to be at 7:30 in the morning, and those were more the speed networking kind of structured events.
Right.
Where you have a table. It was actually 20 minutes. I went to a couple, and they ring a bell, and you stand up and you go to another table. And so definitely if you're not super excited about networking, or maybe a little bit more shy, doing the events like the morning mixes or other speed networking events might be a way to kind of ease into this world of networking. I'll let you talk about YLNI.
Sure. YLNI stands for Young Leaders of Northeast Indiana, and they're an organization that focuses on developing young leaders in our community. They have a monthly, what they call hotspot, so it is an informal networking event for young leaders to connect with each other, and it's generally at a new spot in Fort Wayne, or a real active spot, in either at the art museum or at a restaurant or a bar, or those kinds of things. The Active 2030 Club has a similar program. Active 2030 Club is also for young leaders with a more philanthropic tilt than the YLNI organization. Someone just said, I thought that YLNI was by invitation only. No, anyone can attend the hotspots, and they're on their website at ylni.org. They're generally once a month. Anyone is welcome. There are some things that are for members only, and both organizations are a member organization, but YLNI does cater to the greater community. So I encourage you to look it up, because it's a great place to find folks who are also interested, young leaders, in getting more connected. Professional Connections of Northeast Indiana, Social Media Breakfast. What I would encourage you to do, in fact, what I did before this presentation, was I just Googled networking in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and 25 networking groups came up because these are events. There's also networking groups that you can join, which means these groups come up and they invite one person from each industry to be a part of that group. So it's almost like a leads group where you can talk with folks. So I sell paper, so there wouldn't be anybody that sells paper there. And there's one marketer, and there's one who's this, that, and the other. So there's events like what you see listed here, and then there's those groups too. But Google them and see what you might find that's a good fit for you. I have found the social media breakfast to be a wonderful networking event. And it's more about learning how to use social media in a very effective way, but it's a great way to network with anybody. It's all kinds of professions that are there who use social media. It's just not social media gurus, and it's great. And it's monthly and it's timed, so you get out of there. It starts at 7:30, and at 8:30 you're walking to your car, which I know for busy folks it is very much appreciated for our events not to drone on and on and on.
Is that organized by the chamber? Who does that?
It's not. It's organized by themselves. It's kind of a group that organically built. So look up Social Media Breakfast, or if you tweet, they're on Twitter at SMB for Social Media Breakfast FW Fort Wayne. You can find any of their information.
That's a new one. See, I didn't even know that one. Cool. So there are many other networking events. Even here, if you're a student here at IPFW, look at the events calendar. If there's conferences, seminars, workshops, those different things, we would highly encourage you to start getting involved in. So I think, to kind of keep it in perspective, networking is a voyage. You're always going to be doing it. It's not something you just put, you go to a couple events and you're done. It's about developing those great relationships, those purposeful and meaningful and real relationships. Sometimes you're going to go to an event and you're going to walk away with, wow, that was great. I met a lot of very great people. And other times, you enjoyed the food and had some good information was shared, and that was the end of it. My theory is, like most things, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And basically, if you have a purpose or a goal behind it, you'll be successful with that. So at this point, we're getting close to the end of the webinar, and we'll open it up for any questions that anyone has. We did put our contact information up there, so you can always follow up with us individually. We will be sending out a survey, kind of an evaluation of this webinar. And I'll also provide some information about our Mastodon Mentor program for anyone who's interested in learning more about that, because that would be a good way to start building that network. So we'll hang on the line for a little bit longer. If you have a question, feel free to type it in the little chat box. If not, thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.